The fluorescent lights of the Chicago Public Library hummed overhead as Marcus Thompson hunched over a worn textbook, his calloused fingers tracing the words he'd read a dozen times before. Outside, November rain pelted against the windows, creating rivulets that distorted the view of the bustling street below. At 22, Marcus had the kind of eyes that had seen too much, deep brown, constantly alert, carrying the weight of responsibilities that most his age couldn't fathom. "Library closes in 30 minutes," the elderly librarian, Mrs. Chen, whispered as she passed his table. She'd been watching him come here every evening for the past 3 years. Always the last to leave, always buried in military history books or studying for his GED. Marcus nodded, not looking up from the page. "Just finishing this chapter, Mrs. Chen. Thank you." The truth was, he didn't want to go home. Home was a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side that he shared with his mother and 2 younger siblings. Home was where the electricity had been shut off again because he'd had to choose between the light bill and his sister Jasmine's asthma medication. Home was where his mother's disappointed sighs seemed to echo off the water-stained walls. His phone buzzed, a text from his boss at the warehouse. "Don't bother coming in tomorrow, cutting shifts. Sorry, kid." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. That was the 3rd job he'd lost this year. Not for lack of trying. He showed up early, stayed late, never complained. But when companies needed to cut costs, the high school dropout with a record was always first to go. "You reading about wars again?" a voice interrupted his spiral. Marcus looked up to see Damon, his best friend since elementary school, shaking rainwater from his jacket. Where Marcus was lean and wiry from years of stretching every meal, Damon had the build of someone who'd never missed dinner. His designer sneakers squeaked against the library's linoleum floor. "Military strategy," Marcus corrected, gesturing to the book. "Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Did you know that most battles are won before they're even fought? It's all about preparation, positioning, understanding your enemy and yourself." Damon snorted. "Man, you need to stop filling your head with that stuff." "What's the point? You think the Army's gonna take someone with a juvenile record? They want college boys, not kids from our neighborhood." The words stung because they echoed what everyone had been telling Marcus since he was 15, and made the mistake that haunted him still. One night, one wrong decision, one stolen car to help his cousin, and suddenly every door seemed to slam shut in his face. "People change," Marcus said quietly. "Records can be expunged. I've been clean for 7 years, Damon. Not even a parking ticket. And what? You think they're gonna make you a general?" Damon laughed, but it wasn't cruel, just resigned. "Come on, man. I gotta connect at this club downtown. They need security. Cash money, no questions asked. You could make in one night what that warehouse was paying you in a week." Marcus shook his head. He'd watched too many friends go down that path. Easy money that led to harder choices. Quick cash that came with chains you couldn't see until they were wrapped around your neck. "I'm good," he said, packing up his books. "I've got a plan." "You always got a plan," Damon sighed. "Just remember, planning don't put food on the table." After Damon left, Marcus made his way through the rain-soaked streets. The neighborhood was a patchwork of struggling businesses and abandoned buildings, beauty shops next to boarded-up stores, churches standing defiant among the decay. He passed groups of young men huddled under streetlights, their eyes tracking him with a mixture of recognition and warning. Marcus kept his head down, his pace steady. He'd learned long ago that showing fear or showing off were equally dangerous on these streets. The apartment building's elevator had been broken for 6 months, so Marcus climbed the 5 flights of stairs, each step echoing in the graffiti-covered stairwell. He could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television through her door on the 3rd floor, always turned up too loud because she refused to admit she needed hearing aids. On the 4th floor, the Wilsons were arguing again, their voices carrying through the thin walls. He paused outside his own door, key in hand, steeling himself. Through the wood, he could hear his mother on the phone, probably with his aunt, probably complaining about him again. 22 years old and still reading those war books like he's going to be some kind of hero. I told him, I said, "Marcus, you need to be realistic. Get a steady job, maybe think about trade school." But does he listen? Marcus pushed open the door, and his mother, Patricia, immediately ended her call. She was still in her Unified Services uniform from her job cleaning offices downtown, her face drawn with exhaustion. Despite everything, she was beautiful. The kind of woman who'd once had dreams of her own before life, and 3 kids had worn them down to nothing but survival. "You're late," she said, not looking at him as she stirred something on the stove. The kitchen was small enough that she could reach the refrigerator without moving from her spot. "Jasmine's been asking for you. Her breathing's been bad today." "I'll check on her," Marcus said, setting down his books. "Mom, about the electricity, I know about the electricity, Marcus. Mrs. Johnson from down the hall told me. Her son works for ComEd. Patricia's voice was tight with frustration. How am I supposed to keep insulin cold without a refrigerator? How's your brother supposed to do his homework in the dark? I'll figure it out, Marcus said. The same words he'd been saying for years. I always do. With what job? She finally turned to face him, and Marcus could see the tears she was fighting back. That warehouse position you swore was going to be permanent? Or maybe that security gig that lasted all of 2 months? Baby, I'm tired. I'm so tired of watching you chase these dreams while we sink deeper and deeper. It's not a dream. Mom, it's a goal. There's a difference. The military, Marcus? Really? They don't take boys like you. Boys like me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of accumulated disappointment and judgment. Marcus felt the anger rise in his chest, hot and familiar. You mean boys who made one mistake when they were kids? Boys who've been paying for it every day since? Or do you mean boys who refuse to accept that this, he gestured around the cramped apartment, is all they'll ever have? I mean boys who don't know when to stop fighting battles they can't win. Patricia's voice cracked. Your father thought he could change things too. Thought he could be different. You see where that got us. The mention of his father, a man who'd walked out when Marcus was 10, chasing his own impossible dreams, was a low blow. Marcus bit back his response and headed to the room he shared with his younger brother, DeAndre. Jasmine was in the lower bunk, her breathing labored but steady. At 8 years old, she had their mother's beauty and their father's stubborn streak. Her inhaler sat on the nightstand, nearly empty. Another thing to add to the list of things Marcus needed to figure out how to pay for. Hey, Jazz, he whispered, sitting on the edge of her bed. Her eyes fluttered open. Marcus, did you bring me a story? It was their tradition. Every night, Marcus would tell her stories. Not fairy tales, but real stories from history. Stories about people who'd overcome impossible odds, who'd risen from nothing to become something. Tonight, he told her about Hannibal crossing the Alps, about how everyone said it was impossible to take elephants over mountains, but he did it anyway. Because he had a plan, Jasmine whispered, her eyes growing heavy. Like you. Like me, Marcus agreed, tucking her blanket around her thin shoulders. DeAndre, 15 and already taller than Marcus, was pretending to sleep in the top bunk, but Marcus knew better. You need to stop filling her head with that stuff, DeAndre said, once Jasmine's breathing had evened out. She thinks you're some kind of superhero. Maybe I am, Marcus said, trying for levity. Superheroes don't get fired from warehouse jobs. DeAndre's voice was bitter. And they don't let their families sit in the dark. Marcus didn't have an answer for that. He left the room quietly, returning to the kitchen where his mother was putting a plate on the table. Rice and beans, the same meal they'd had 3 times this week. Eat, she said simply. Marcus sat down, the weight of the day settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Through the thin walls, he could hear the sounds of the building, babies crying, music playing, lives being lived in parallel struggle. This was supposed to be temporary. When he dropped out of high school to help support the family after his father left, it was supposed to be just for a year or two, but temporary had a way of becoming permanent in neighborhoods like this. After dinner, Marcus climbed out onto the fire escape, his one place of solitude. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed and gleaming. From here he could see the downtown skyline, towers of glass and steel that might as well have been on another planet for how accessible they were to someone like him. He pulled out a worn notebook from his pocket, the pages filled with his cramped handwriting. Plans, goals, timelines, all meticulously detailed. Get his GED, almost done. Clear his record, lawyer said it was possible for a fee he didn't have. Apply to the military. Army recruiter had said maybe, if everything else was in order. It was a long shot, maybe impossible, but it was all he had. His phone rang, an unknown number. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe accept. Mr. Thompson, this is Sergeant Williams from the Army Recruitment Center on Western. I know it's late, but I wanted to catch you before tomorrow. We've had a cancellation for our accelerated entry program. It's unconventional, but given your test scores and your persistence, I wanted to offer you the slot. You'd need to be ready to ship to basic training in 2 weeks. Marcus felt his heart stop. My record is under review. No promises, but the new diversity initiative is giving us some flexibility with nonviolent juvenile offenses, especially for candidates who show exceptional potential. Your ASVAB scores were off the charts. Mr. Thompson, whatever you've been studying, it's working. 2 weeks, Marcus repeated, his mind racing. 2 weeks to get everything in order, to convince his mother, to find someone to help with the bills while he was gone. Yes, I'll take it. Come by the office tomorrow at 800 hours, and Mr. Thompson, don't be late. Marcus hung up, staring at the phone like it might disappear. Below him, the city hummed with life, unaware that one of its forgotten sons had just been thrown a lifeline. It wasn't a guarantee. Nothing ever was for kids like him. But it was a chance, and that was more than he'd had an hour ago. He thought about all the people who'd told him he'd never amount to anything. Teachers who'd written him off, employers who'd looked at his address and assumed the worst, even his own family who'd learned to temper hope with harsh reality. They said he'd never have a future. Marcus smiled, a real smile for the first time in months. They were about to be wrong. Inside the apartment, he could hear his mother moving around, probably unable to sleep, worried about bills and kids and all the ways life could go wrong. Tomorrow, he'd tell her about the call, about the chance. She wouldn't believe it, wouldn't want to hope. But Marcus had learned something from all those military history books. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not on grand stages, but in small moments of decision. The city stretched out before him, full of obstacles and opportunities in equal measure. Somewhere out there, a future was waiting, one that nobody thought a kid from the South Side could claim. But Marcus Thompson had never been good at accepting what everybody thought. He had 2 weeks to prove them all wrong. And this time, failure wasn't an option. End of Chapter 1. Please type OK to continue with Chapter 2, Tentar Novamente, Gokadatar. Chapter 2, The Crucible of Transformation. The recruitment office smelled like industrial cleaning solution and broken dreams. Marcus arrived at 07:45 hours, 15 minutes early, wearing the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have a stain. Around him, other potential recruits filled out paperwork or stared at motivational posters featuring soldiers in various heroic poses. Most were fresh out of high school, their faces unmarked by the kind of worries that kept Marcus up at night. Thompson! Sergeant Williams emerged from a back office, his uniform so crisp it could cut glass. He was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of bearing that suggested he'd never doubted his place in the world. Follow me. The office was sparse, a desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered with certificates and commendations. Williams closed the door and studied Marcus with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. I'm going to be straight with you, Williams began, pulling out a thick folder. Your case went all the way up to the battalion commander. That juvenile record? It's a problem. But your test scores, he whistled low. 99th percentile on the ASVAB. Perfect scores on military history and strategic thinking. Where'd you learn this stuff? Chicago Public Library, Sergeant, Marcus answered. Every book they had on military strategy, leadership, history. Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Napoleon Patton, I've read them all. Why? The question was simple but loaded. Marcus had practiced this answer, but sitting here, it felt inadequate. Because I needed to understand how people win when everyone expects them to lose. How you take disadvantage and turn it into advantage. How you lead when nobody thinks you have the right to. Williams leaned back, something shifting in his expression. I grew up in Detroit, East Side. I know what it's like to have everyone count you out before you even start. He pushed a stack of papers across the desk. This is your shot. One shot. You screw up in basic, you're out. No second chances. The waiver for your record is conditional on exemplary performance. I understand. Sergeant, do you? Because basic training is going to try to break you. And for someone like you, someone who's been leading his family, making adult decisions since he was a kid, it's going to be even harder. You're going to have drill sergeants half your age screaming in your face, telling you you're worthless. You're going to want to quit every single day. I won't quit. Marcus's voice was steady, certain. Williams nodded slowly. We'll see. Report to MEPS at 500 hours on November 20th. Bring only what's on this list. Leave your pride at home. You won't need it where you're going. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and goodbyes. Marcus worked every odd job he could find. Moving furniture, cleaning warehouses, anything for cash. He needed to leave his family with something, even if it wasn't enough. His mother alternated between angry silence and tearful pleas for him to reconsider. You're abandoning us, she said the night before he left, standing in his doorway as he packed his single bag. Just like your father. The comparison cut deep, but Marcus had learned to absorb pain without flinching. I'm trying to build something better for us, Mom. Basic training pay isn't much, but it's steady. I'll send home everything I can. We need you here. You need me to be more than I can be here. He turned to face her, seeing not the angry woman, but the scared mother underneath. I'm drowning here, Mom. We all are. This is my chance to swim. She left without another word, but later that night, he found a small Bible on his pillow with a note. Psalm 144:1. Come home safe. He looked up the verse. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. The morning of departure came too quickly. Marcus stood in the pre-dawn darkness outside the military entrance processing station, his breath visible in the cold November air. Other recruits clustered in small groups, some cocky, some terrified, most somewhere in between. Marcus stood alone, comfortable with solitude. Thompson. He turned to see Damon jogging toward him, bundled in an expensive coat that probably cost more than Marcus had made in the last month. You really doing this? Damon asked, slightly out of breath. Yeah, man, I really am. Damon pulled him into a hug, quick and fierce. You remember where you came from, yeah? Don't let them turn you into something you're not. I'm trying to turn into something I am, Marcus replied. The bus ride to Fort Benning, Georgia took 16 hours. Marcus watched Chicago disappear, then Illinois, then everything familiar. Around him, other recruits talked nervously or slept. A few played cards. One kid, who couldn't have been more than 18, was quietly crying while pretending to look out the window. First time away from home? Marcus asked quietly. The kid nodded, embarrassed. You? Yeah, Marcus lied. He'd been away from home since the night his father left, even when his body was still there. Fort Benning appeared like a small city carved out of Georgia pine. Even from the bus, Marcus could hear the distant sound of drilling, shouting, the rhythm of military life. As they pulled up to the reception area, a figure in a campaign hat stood waiting, arms crossed, face unreadable. Listen up. The drill sergeant's voice could have stripped paint. You are no longer individuals. You are not special. You are not unique. You are raw material, and it is my job to forge you into soldiers. Most of you will fail. Those who succeed will earn the right to serve. Now get off my bus. The next hours were a careful orchestration of chaos. Hair cut to uniform length, civilian clothes stripped away, uniforms issued that somehow managed to fit nobody properly. Marcus moved through it all with quiet efficiency, following orders, speaking only when spoken to. He'd learned long ago that survival often meant becoming invisible. You! A drill sergeant materialized in front of him. What's your name, Private? Thompson, drill sergeant. Thompson. Says here you're 22. What took you so long? Couldn't hack it in the real world? No excuse, drill sergeant. The drill sergeant circled him like a predator. Chicago, huh? South Side. Let me guess. Thought the army would be your way out of the hood? Think you're gonna be some kind of hero? No, drill sergeant. Then why are you here, Thompson? For a split second, Marcus considered telling the truth about his family, his dreams, his desperate need to become something more. Instead, he gave the answer that would keep him safe. To serve my country. Drill sergeant, the drill sergeant snorted. We'll see about that. Basic training was everything Sergeant Williams had warned and more. Days began at 04:30 with drill sergeants flipping bunks, screaming recruits awake, physical training that pushed bodies past their limits, classroom instruction on everything from military law to first aid, weapons training where perfection was the only acceptable standard. Marcus excelled at the academic portions, his years of self-study paying off. He could recite military regulations, understood tactical concepts that confused others, scored expert on every written test. But the physical demands were brutal. Years of inconsistent meals had left him lighter than ideal, and while he had street-hardened endurance, the scientific precision of military fitness was something else entirely. Thompson, you call those push-ups? Drill Sergeant Martinez stood over him during PT, counting off his failures. My grandmother could do better, and she's been dead for 10 years. Marcus's arms shook, sweat burning his eyes, but he kept going. In his mind, he saw Jasmine's face, heard his mother's doubts, felt the weight of every person who'd said he'd never amount to anything. 20 more, Thompson, unless you want to quit. I hear McDonald's is hiring. No. Drill. Sergeant. Each word came out between desperate breaths. The worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the mental games. Drill sergeants who found every weakness, every insecurity, and exploited it mercilessly. They discovered his juvenile record within the first week. Well, Drill Sergeant Roberts announced during morning formation. Looks like we got ourselves a car thief. Thompson here thought he'd trade stealing cars for stealing glory. What do you think, Private Thompson? You gonna steal a tank next? The other recruits snickered, and Marcus felt the familiar burn of shame. But he'd learned something on the streets that served him here. Never let them see you break. No, Drill Sergeant, he responded, eyes fixed straight ahead. Why should the Army trust a thief, Thompson? The Army shouldn't trust words, Drill Sergeant. Only actions. Something flickered in Robert's eyes. Surprise. Maybe even respect. But it was gone in an instant. Pretty words don't make a soldier, Thompson. Drop and give me 50. As the weeks progressed, Marcus found his rhythm. He learned to shut down the part of his mind that questioned, that felt, that remembered home. He became a machine designed for one purpose, completing whatever task was put in front of him. His body hardened, adding muscle to his lean frame. His mind sharpened, absorbing every lesson. But it was in the tactical exercises that Marcus truly shone. During land navigation, while others stumbled through the Georgia woods with compasses and maps, Marcus moved with intuitive understanding. He'd studied terrain assessment in books, but more than that, he'd learned to read environments on Chicago streets where a wrong turn could be fatal. Thompson! Lieutenant Colonel Harris, observing the exercise, pulled him aside. Where'd you learn to navigate like that? Self-taught, sir. Books and practice. Your squad finished the course 30 minutes faster than any other. You led them through terrain that's tripped up rangers. How? Marcus considered his words carefully. I learned to see patterns, sir. In terrain, in people, in situations. Every environment has a logic to it. You just have to understand what it's trying to tell you. Harris made a note on his clipboard. Interesting. The combat training was where street experience translated most directly. Hand-to-hand combat, situational awareness, threat assessment, these weren't abstract concepts to Marcus. He'd been navigating violence and its potential since childhood, but now he learned to channel it, control it, make it precise. Thompson's got natural tactical instincts. He overheard one instructor tell another. Kid thinks 3 moves ahead. But praise was rare and always followed by harder challenges. The drill sergeants seemed to take personal offense at any sign of competence, as if excellence was an insult to their authority. Night was the hardest time. In the darkness of the barracks, surrounded by the sounds of exhausted recruits, homesickness hit like a physical pain. Marcus wrote letters he couldn't send. The family computer had been pawned months ago, and phone calls were a rare privilege. He wondered if Jasmine was taking her medication, if DeAndre was staying out of trouble, if his mother had forgiven him for leaving. One night, Private Chen, bunked next to him, whispered in the darkness, "You ever wonder if it's worth it?" Marcus stared at the ceiling, thinking of all the nights he'd stared at a different ceiling in a different place, wondering the same thing. Every day. Then why don't you quit? I've seen how the drills ride you. It's like they want you to fail. Maybe they do, Marcus admitted. But what they want doesn't matter. Only what is matters. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus turned to face him. It means you can't control what people think of you or how they treat you. You can only control what you do about it. They want me to quit? Fine. But I won't. They want me to fail? That's their problem. My job is to succeed. Week 6 brought the first real test. A 3-day field training exercise that simulated combat conditions. Sleep deprivation, constant movement, complex tactical problems that required quick thinking and decisive action. It was during this exercise that everything changed. Marcus's squad was assigned to establish a defensive position while under simulated enemy fire. Their squad leader, Private Morrison, a college boy from Vermont who'd been designated for officer candidate school, froze under the pressure, unable to process the chaos around him. Marcus watched for 30 seconds, saw the confusion spreading through the squad, then made a decision that would have consequences he couldn't foresee. He stepped up. Rodriguez, Matthews, establish overlapping fields of fire on that ridge. Chen Williams, get that machine gun position fortified. Everyone else, follow my lead. His voice cut through the confusion with absolute clarity. The squad responded instinctively, following his commands without question. Within minutes, they'd established a textbook-perfect defensive position that had instructors raising eyebrows. Who gave you permission to take command? Private Thompson? Drill Sergeant Martinez materialized beside him as the exercise concluded. No one, Drill Sergeant. The mission required leadership. I provided it. You think you're officer material, Thompson? Think those street smarts make you special? No, Drill Sergeant. I think the mission comes first. Always. Martinez studied him for a long moment, then did something Marcus had never seen. He almost smiled. Carry on, Private. Word of the incident spread. During the next exercise, when Morrison froze again, the squad automatically looked to Marcus. This time, he didn't hesitate. He led them through a complex ambush scenario, coordinating movements, adapting to changing conditions, thinking 3 steps ahead just like he'd learned to do on very different streets. Thompson. Lieutenant Colonel Harris appeared at dinner that evening, causing every recruit at the table to leap to attention. At ease. Walk with me. They moved away from the mess hall, into the Georgia evening. The air was thick with humidity and possibility. I've been reviewing your file, Harris began. Your test scores, your performance metrics, the incident reports from your instructors. You have a gift for tactical thinking that's extremely rare. Your drill sergeants want to recommend you for advanced leadership training. Marcus's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. Sir, there's a program. Accelerated advancement for exceptional candidates. It's demanding. Most who attempt it fail, but successful completion fast-tracks you through the ranks. Your background. Harris paused, choosing his words. Could be a liability or an asset, depending on how you frame it. How do you mean, sir? The Army needs leaders who understand struggle, who've overcome real adversity. Your juvenile record shows poor judgment, yes, but your actions since show growth, determination, resilience. The question is, which story defines you? Marcus thought of all the stories he'd told Jasmine, all the histories he'd studied of people who'd risen from nothing. Neither, sir. I'm still writing my story. Harris nodded approvingly. Graduate basic with honors, and we'll see about getting you into the program. Dismissed. Marcus saluted and watched the lieutenant colonel walk away. Around him, Fort Benning hummed with activity. Soldiers training, preparing, becoming something more than they were. He thought about his family in Chicago, about everyone who'd said he'd never amount to anything, about futures that seemed impossible until suddenly they weren't. The next morning, he attacked training with renewed purpose. Every push-up was for Jasmine. Every mile run was for DeAndre. Every perfect shot on the rifle range was for his mother. And every tactical problem solved was for himself, proof that the boy who'd stolen a car could become a man who protected nations. During mail call that week, he finally received a letter. His mother's handwriting, shaky with emotion. Marcus, Mrs. Rodriguez helped me write this on her computer. Jasmine is doing better. The church helped with her medication. DeAndre got a job at the grocery store. We're managing. I'm still angry you left, but I'm proud too. Don't let them change who you are. Just become who you were meant to be. Love, Mom. That night, Private Chen asked him again, is it worth it? This time, Marcus didn't hesitate. Ask me when I'm wearing stars. Chen laughed. Stars? You mean like a general? Thompson, you're crazy. Marcus smiled in the darkness. Yeah, that's what they keep telling me. Outside, Georgia insects sang their nighttime chorus, and somewhere in the distance, another group of recruits was learning to march in formation. Marcus closed his eyes and saw not the past that defined him or the present that challenged him, but the future that called to him. Impossible, improbable, but absolutely worth fighting for.